For only the fourth time on French soil, the opening of a genocide and crimes against humanity trial. The previous three all involved notorious Nazis or Nazi collaborators. This one puts in the dock 54-year-old Pascal Simbikangwa, a former head of Rwandan intelligence, one of the alleged orchestrators of a genocide that would leave nearly 800,000 dead in just 100 days. Why the case is being tried in Paris instead of Kigali is a story unto itself. So is the fact that it opens nearly 20 years after the facts. Exceptionally, judges have allowed cameras in the courts, highlighting the historical nature of the trial. As for the Rwandan genocide, well, it still haunts Africa and France, which Kigali at the time accused of complicity when it stepped in and created a buffer zone to stop revenge attacks against retreating Hutus. Rwanda even severed relations for a time after 2006, when a French investigating magistrate accused President Paul Kagame of staging the downing of his predecessor's plane, the act which precipitated the genocide. With Rwandan forces now deployed side by side along the French in the Central African Republic, relations have certainly come a long way. Just how far? We'll be asking. And more broadly, can you talk of closure for victims of a genocide? What purpose does a trial like this one really serve? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the Rwandan genocide on trial. With us, he was born in Kigali on the eve of another genocide in 1963. I want to welcome back to the debate program Benjamin SEHENE, a writer. Among your books, The Ethnic Trap. Thank you for being with us. Thanks as well to Patrick de SAINT EXUPERY, I guess you could say the editor of France's answer to the New Yorker, 21 magazine. And you're also the author of Unspeakable France in Rwanda. Pierre, CONESA, a political scientist, and the author of The Manufacturing of an Enemy, or How to Kill with a Clear Conscience, the France 24 debate, where you can always join the conversation, and you have on Facebook and on Twitter our hashtag F24debate. Let's, before we go to our panel, go to Central Courts in Paris and join France 24's Yves Irvine, who's been following the opening arguments of today's trial. Yves, Pascal Simbikangwa, is he, would you say, a proverbial big fish when it comes to the orchestration of the Rwandan genocide?
Well, he's the first time France has brought an individual from the genocide on trial here in France. For that reason, it is historic, and he's definitely generating a lot of attention here in Paris. Now, to say he was a big fish, it would be true. He's being accused of being complicity in genocide and complicity in crimes against humanity. He is seen as not so much a hands-on in the killings, but more one of the organisers in the genocide. Now, for the Gautiers, they feel that there was other individuals also residing here in France that perhaps they'd like to see in front of the courts ahead of Pascal Simbikangwa, but he's definitely somebody that stands accused of being very close to President Habyarimana and that close circle of Hutus that were in power at the time of 1994. And indeed, according to the witness statements gathered against him here in this trial, they said that he did, despite being in a wheelchair after an accident in 1986, he did supply weapons to Hutu militia at the time, and indeed give orders, or at least encourage them to kill any Tutsis that approached checkpoints.
Yves, I was going to ask you, he's 54 years old now. He's been in a wheelchair since 1986 when he was in a car accident. How did he seem to you when he sat in the defendant's chair when he spoke?
Well, indeed, he seems very relaxed and serene and in good form, I have to say. He is sitting in his wheelchair there in the courthouse, and we've been told that roughly the days will finish up at around 7 or 8 p.m. local time, when there is an ambulance waiting to take him away from the courthouse again. But even they were just discussing there in the last couple of minutes in the court that accident in 1986, and the president of the course, pressing Simbikangwa, asking him if really that was the time that he stopped being an active soldier, if you like. He had to change his life entirely. He was married with young kids, and really asking him, was this not a time of incredible mental distress? Simbikangwa really remaining quite defiant, saying no. He accepted very quickly the facts. He turned towards this new life, and indeed, as we know, he went on to become part of the presidential guard for that former president Habyarimana.
Benjamin SEHENE, your thoughts on this trial opening today?
It is. I think it is the best a trial that could be held, especially on French soil, beginning with someone like Simbikangwa, because he was someone who was, first of all, who was well known and who had even run away to a French territory overseas, to the Réunion. And the fact that it is a first trial in France is also a way of coming to terms with the genocide and France's participation in the whole tragedy in Rwanda.
What France's implication was, and we're definitely going to be speaking about it. In her, you just heard Yves Irvine mention the Gautiers. That's a couple which, just like the Klarsfeld couple, tracked down notorious Nazis. This trial, in part, made possible by the relentless pursuit of that Franco-Rwandan couple, Yves Irvine, who went to the Champagne region east of Paris to meet them.
France's genocide hunters. For the past 14 years, this couple has given every spare minute to reading, researching and trying to track down suspects involved in the Rwandan genocide.
Why did we take on the job? Simply because there were criminals here and the justice system wasn't doing anything about it. We're not professional investigators, but we decided we had to start somewhere, so we would just take it one case at a time. Look at that specific suspect. Where was he? What's being said about him? We need to go and check if that's true.
On April 6, 1994, Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana, a Hutu, was killed after his plane was shot down. Hutus who were in power accused the minority Tutsis of being behind the attack, although the case remains unresolved to this day. The genocide began. Within 100 days, over 800,000 people were killed, the vast majority of them Tutsi. As the violence swelled, a group of Tutsi rebels who had been exiled in Uganda fought their way back into Rwanda. Well armed, they fought to save their people and caused the Hutus to flee. It was the Gautiers who pressed charges against Pascal Simbikangwa back in 2009.
A lot of people say he distributed weapons and gave orders to kill Tutsis if they showed up at checkpoints. The proof we have is in witness accounts. There's relatively little in terms of written proof in Rwanda, but when you have many, many witnesses saying the same thing, you can conclude it's the truth.
Pascal Simbikangwa stands accused of complicity in genocide and complicity in crimes against humanity. He denies all charges. For his lawyers, the case is clear. There is no substantial evidence against him. A former soldier, Simbikangwa worked in the intelligence services and came from the same region as President Habyarimana, a connection many see as proof of guilt, but it's a shortcut his lawyers don't accept.
Pascal Simbikangwa was not close to the government. He had great admiration for President Habyarimana, who happened to come from the same region as he did. He was part of the presidential guard, but that doesn't make him close to power. He didn't make the decisions, absolutely not.
Simbikangwa's trial is France's first on the Rwandan genocide, and his defence team fears this could play against him. 20 years after the events, France's first trial is to begin on Tuesday, February 4th, with a verdict expected on March 14th.
All right, a lot of food for thought there. Patrick de SAINT EXUPERY, you heard the defense attorney saying he was not someone from the inner circle. That's not how the French press has been reporting it, though.
No, that's not what the facts also tell. But the judgment, that trial is very important for France. Just to tell it very quickly, for 20 years, the events happened in Rwanda 20 years ago have just been a black hole in France, a black hole. The Rwanda genocide didn't exist in France.
Well, you say a black hole, but come on, there's been parliamentary commissions. You testified before one of them.
Yeah, but all was done for distraction, for intoxication, for not looking at the reality of the event, not looking on trying to understand what happens on the ground. So there have been a lot of intoxication, discussion on stupid stuff like who did crash the plane, who is the beginning of the genocide, which is not interesting on the beginning. But we didn't have the work trying to understand really what happens in Rwanda in '94. We don't have done that work. On that process will be the first occasion in France to make that work who has not been done up to now. That's a very important step.
The human rights advocates pointing out that you've had trials of Rwandan genocide suspects in, I've got the list here, Belgium, Switzerland, Norway, Netherlands, Canada, and there's one now going on in Germany. But could it have happened earlier in France, realistically, in political terms? Well, France is a great country. Has done a lot for universal rights and stuff like that. It should have happened before. It should have. And another reason for that is the important French implication in the Rwanda file. We should have done that work long ago. This is last step, the last occasion, and we have to do that very carefully and very intelligently. Pierre, CONESA?
Yes, I quite agree with Mr. SAINT EXUPERY. You know, this, unfortunately, the complicity between the French administration and the genocide, the Rwandan administration has to be dismantled. I mean, we have to explain how it happened. And in a way, you know, this genocide was a part of the France-Afrique policy, you know, this policy which decided in 58, at the beginning of the 5th Constitution, that it was just the affair of the president. So there was a separate decision process in France, in which the parliament has nothing to say, in which, you know, the small cell...
There was foreign policy on the one hand and Africa policy on the other.
Exactly. It was affaire réservée, you know, reserved affair, in which, you know, there was a process, decision process, which was just has to respond to requirement of the president to decide on African affairs. So it's exactly the same process. So when, for example, the first step of the genocide, because this genocide is the end of a long process in which you have massacre in 59, in 62, in 68, 9, etc., and even in 92. And in that event, in 92, the FIDH, you know, the NGOs of human rights, have decided to make a report.
International Human Rights Organization.
Yes, it did a report trying to explain what happened in 92. And it was very difficult for them, for Mr. Carbonare, who was in charge of this report, to explain to French administration what happened 2 years before the genocide, and to explain that there were a mechanism in place. So I don't want why this administration didn't want to hear what he was explaining.
And the French had military advisors at the time who were assisting the Habyarimana government. What was the reasoning behind that? What was the thinking behind supporting those?
Well, it was that kind of thinking in which, you know, to explain that Rwanda is a strategic place in which, you know, I would say, English push, you know, as Fashoda Affairs was explaining, to get position from French. They were mainly using an argument which, for me, was a dream, you know. They were explaining that the FPR, you know, the Tutsis party was speaking English.
Which is true. Paul Kagame grew up mostly in Uganda.
Mainly, yes. So how could he have learned, you know, French? So that's
so the fact that he spoke English was the problem.
Was the proof, you know.
You have to understand that from 90 to 94, France had a secret policy on Rwanda. The presence of these military people in Rwanda was secret, was very discreet. The parliament, as Pierre said, was not informed. The public population was not informed. And at that time, from 90 to 94, there were at least 300 French soldiers always still in Rwanda, and the best unity of the French army.
Benjamin SEHENE had...
In fact, I could qualify the French presence in Rwanda as being based on personal relationships between President Mitterrand and the Habyarimana clan.
So it was a personal affair in a way.
It was a personal affair,
and
which went bad.
And do you feel as though Pascal Simbikangwa was a member of that inner circle of that Habyarimana clan?
Yes, in a way, he's from the same region as Habyarimana, and he was part of the clique of people who decided on matters concerning security and local administration.
He claimed himself to be part of the Akazu. The Akazu is the name for the little house. That was the little clan who was keeping his aunts in Rwanda. And himself, in a book, he claimed to be part of Akazu. So himself is saying, well, I was quite an important guy, quite a responsible. And first, we find trace of him in diplomatic depeche from Belgium in '92, saying that he is an important guy. And during the genocide, on the beginning of the genocide, on the 22nd of April, the State Department from US was telling to Rwanda, take care, guys. We know exactly who is doing what. And in the name given by the State Department, there were the name of Pascal Simbikangwa. So he's definitely, and it's proven, written, an important guy.
So, and the fact that he was in charge of local administration gave him leeway to have a distribution system for machetes, for example.
So, Pierre CONESA, I want to get back to what you said. At the time, it's sort of a closed secret. It's the president, the executive office, and the French executive office's personal sort of affair, what happens in Rwanda. But how much of a closed secret? How much did the...
No, I won't say that it was a closed secret, because, you know, it was a cooperation military affairs. In a way, cooperation could be a vast, you know, word to explain that. We send military men to train and form, you know, the armies of Rwanda. But the question is that no political eye was on this military man. So when, you know, the guy you are training are having a defeat, you say to Paris, I have more needs, I need more armaments, etc. So you follow the guys you have trained in the front, and the more and more step by step, you know, these military men were involved, you know, in the war. And during the war, I mean, at what time, you know, the political system had to say, okay, stop, that's finished. No. This building, you know, this administration construction was so that no one could say you have to stop it, because it was just a face-to-face discussion between the diplomatic cell of the presidency and the military staff of the presidency and the military chain, you know what it means. So there are no diplomatic and political control on that process. And that's a question. The second aspect you have to keep in mind...
And on that point, I remember going to the press briefings of the Defense Ministry, and they seemed genuinely beleaguered when the genocide was taking place.
Yeah, but you know, one must keep in mind that the genocide, unfortunately, an originality, which was a mass genocide, which means that there was a system, there was a propaganda, there was a radio, there was a system preparing, planning, and organizing the genocide.
Let's get back to that point, because we have to take a quick break. I want to pick up on that. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.